Hey guys, welcome back to Dragon Ball Daily Draw and Review, the show where I, a lifelong Dragon Ball fan, attempt to read, watch, and review every chapter, episode, and movie in the Dragon Ball franchise in the order it was originally released in Japan. I'm Philip, and today we're discussing Dragon Ball Manga Chapter 6, titled Oolong vs. Son Goku, which, according to the website Kanzenshu, was originally published in Weekly Shonen Jump magazine on January 4th, 1985, written and drawn by series creator Akira Toriyama. So, after having spent the better part of the last chapter goofing around in order to seemingly put off this fight for another week, we finally arrive here, the last chapter of what could be called the Oolong saga. Or, at least, if you were Funimation in the early 2000s, you would call it that. Jokes aside, we do finally arrive at the fight, which Goku is super ready for. More on that in a second. Only to find Oolong suddenly being reasonable. Well, reasonable enough for a villain. He offers to spare Goku and walk away if they just give him another young girl to be his new wife. When Goku confirms that, no, he'd really rather just fight it out, Oolong spots a nearby clock and freaks out. He turns tail and runs out of the village, suddenly transforming into a small, little human-pig hybrid kid. Turns out, Oolong is just an obnoxious little boy. At least, you would probably think that if reading the manga was your first exposure to the series. He mentions being younger than Bulma in the last chapter, and now add to that his small size and desire for wives of the preteen variety. It's now pretty obvious that Oolong is just a kid, which now makes infinitely more sense to me and is 1,000 times less creepy. Because, again, if you're like me, your first exposure to the character was in the Ocean/Funimation dubs here in America, where Oolong has always sounded like a 40-year-old dude who smokes 3 packs a day. But now, try going back and rereading this chapter. And when you do, stop imagining Jackie Gleason as the voice of Oolong and imagine maybe Bart Simpson instead. When he and Goku are talking, imagine Oolong as someone Goku's age, with the same maturity level. Picture them as like 2 kids in the same class. The vibe of the story changes completely, at least for me. What do you think? So it turns out Oolong is just some brat who can transform/shapeshift and is using that power to shake down this small village. Unfortunately for him, there are 2 problems. One, he can only do it for 5 minutes at a time. Then he has to rest in his normal form for a full minute before he can transform again. 2, even when he shapeshifts into a giant demon or robot or whatever, his strength doesn't change, meaning he's got no chance against Goku in a fight. It's really more of like an illusion or a glamour than actual physical transformation, what Oolong does. Except at the end of the chapter, when he transforms into a bat and flaps away on bat wings, meaning he can actually do stuff in his transformed state. Then he transforms into a missile and shoots off at rocket speed, so it seems like there is some true physical component to his transformations, but we can get into that more in a couple of chapters when our guys meet up with the similarly powered Puar. So I mentioned a minute ago about Goku's excitement to fight Oolong. And while we have seen him take on opponents in the previous chapter, interestingly no human foes, only giant animals for now, this is, I believe, the first recorded instance of Battle Junkie Goku, the guy who is really excited to fight strong opponents at the drop of a hat. And that's a feature that'll arguably become his defining trait as time goes on. Sadly, for Goku anyway, Toriyama is in one of his subvert expectations moods. So instead of getting a sick-ass fight where Goku takes on an opponent who can keep changing their size, skill, and ability the longer the fight goes on, Toriyama just has Oolong keep delaying the fight with more and more Hercule/Mr. Satan-esque shenanigans, before eventually just giving up and running away for good. Goku manages to catch up to him thanks to his flying cloud, and he brings Oolong back in his true form to the village to apologize and show everyone where he's hidden the kidnapped girls. Now, like I promised last time, this is where the notion of the word wife gets subverted. So the whole village makes the trek to Oolong's hideout, with the old lady giving Bulma her Dragon Ball along the way and things. And instead of a gross cave or grim tower, we find that Oolong actually lives in a really nice mansion, which he paid for with all the money he's extorted from his victims. Inside, the frantic parents find their kidnapped daughters watching TV, doing aerobics, mixing up drinks, and generally having zero interest in returning to the rustic little village they all came from. You see, Oolong says he wanted a proper wife, someone to cook, clean, do laundry. Basically, it's like Peter Pan and Wendy with the word mother. The girls, however, flip the script on them and instead become the trope of the useless housewife, eating bonbons and watching Oprah. Are you enjoying all these 80s references? They're like the real housewives of Oolong County. It's a relatively harmless conclusion that, in classic Toriyama style, makes the character the butt of their own joke and hoists them up by their own petard. That Oolong is seemingly harmless and pays for his crimes in short order should telegraph that he's now co-star material, as Bulma insists on bringing him along, because she reasons his transforming powers could turn out useful. That sounds weird at first, but then you realize that Bulma has already pressed Goku into service as her bodyguard, and so it looks like we're establishing a theme here where Bulma is really, really good at using people. I think you can tell already that she grew up rich. Narratively, I think Toriyama did it to give him someone else to make fun of for a few chapters, since he'd already been focusing on Bulma pretty heavily in that department, and I think Goku doesn't really lend himself to being the butt of the joke as well as these other two. He's like the perfect straight man. His innate brick wall-ness is the perfect structure for other characters to throw dodgeballs at, only for them to bounce back and hit them in the face. And so this unlikely trio sets off to find the remaining 2 Dragon Balls. We found 5 in 6 chapters, so those last 2 should be a piece of cake, right? More on that next time. Thanks so much for listening along, gang. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like and subscribe to keep up. We post a new video every weekday. It's going to take us around 65 chapters or so before the anime would debut in Japan. After that, we'll be alternating between them, exploring how each one influences the other, eventually tossing the movies in there too, corresponding to when those released in relation to the others. So stick around. And if you really, really like the show, you can buy me a coffee, which I keep calling Senzu Beans, because jokes are funny. Sometimes. Not this time. And a big debt of thanks to the aforementioned Kanzanshu website, where the publication dates came from, and also to fellow YouTuber Mr. Fusion and their Dragon Ball dissection videos, along with the Star Wars Minute podcast for inspiration. Thanks again for watching, guys. See you back here tomorrow from Dragon Ball Manga Chapter 2. Thanks again, guys. See you back here tomorrow for Manga Chapter 7 on Dragon Ball Daily Draw and Review.